Welcome to Access Academy. Today is the last step in our journey, learning about accessing the visual environment. It's actually webinar 4, which allows us to take everything that we have learned previously about clinical low vision evaluations, magnification, students with low vision learning to use optical devices, and apply this all to real situations, real students, real successes. We have with us today, get this to advance. There we go. I am delighted. Oh, stop sharing. I am delighted to welcome back our first presenter, Tara.Bowie, Outreach Education Program Specialist through the Georgia Department of Ed. Thank you so much for being back with us today. We also have returning Dr. Cindy Bachofer, low vision consultant through the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And we have presenter Jodi Floyd with us today, and she is coordinator for Project Magnify with the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. Here we go. Okay, so what can you expect for today? Our learning objectives. We hope and we anticipate that you'll be able to differentiate between various state low vision programs, describe why even early exposure to low vision devices contributes to long-term successes. We want to touch upon that. We want to integrate practical insights from a panel discussion into thinking about what are those daily routines and instructional setting things that we do with our students and how can we integrate device use into that and give you some ideas. We also want to summarize strategies used by various programs to foster confidence and consistent device use. And my keyboard is just not functioning well today. So I dare to say that all of us share a deep commitment to helping our students with low vision access the world around them. But that access it hasn't always been possible. And in fact, I have learned through the research of getting ready for this webinar series, the telescopic lenses were first introduced to the American Medical Association around the turn of the 20th century. And I love this. Anne Sullivan famously said, "I never knew there was so much to see in the world." So how can this look in the day, in our day to day? What is there that we can learn just from existing low vision projects? That's what we want to work on today. And I think that that quote captures the heart of Project PAVE, which is providing access to the visual environment. And it's become a national model. Since 1995, the Tennessee-based model has provided low vision evaluations and device training for students ages 3 to 21, with its mission simple of facilitating visual independence. And I have to say, it gives me so much happiness to be able to share about this project in honor of Dr. Ann Korn, who brought this into being and made such a legacy for so many students with low vision using devices. And here it is still going to this day. And we're going to be learning how this is a model project and that there are other projects that have come after that have just replicated it with their own special tweaks to meet their state's needs. So at its core, Project PAVE is guided by a clear philosophy. Students with low vision have a right to visual access for both near and distance. And think about it in this analogy that I had read. For students with low vision, prescribed optical devices should be considered as essential to daily living as eating a healthy diet. I loved that. So being evaluated, learning to use devices, and then routinely using these tools need to be a team effort. We know that psychosocial factors can't be ignored. We've talked about that throughout this webinar series. And here, this is something that Project PAVE stands for. Also, and above all, it's best practice that students own the devices and just not be restricted from their use. So, like, for example, we want to encourage them to be able to transport, the optical device from home into school and then back again. So, how does this work all exactly? And so, Project PAVE was created at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and it uses a multidisciplinary model that serves children and youth ages 3 through 21 across the state, whether they're rural, urban, clustered in school districts, or dispersed in hard to reach places. It's staffed with qualified personnel, and it's currently funded through the Tennessee Department of Education. A really important distinction is that this model focuses on low vision diagnosis. So rather than a typical medical diagnosis, a low vision diagnosis looks at all aspects of visual functioning, how a student compensates at school, at home. It takes into an account how the student will become visually independent and successful in all academics, personally and socially. And that will There we go. We got it finally. All right. So before the clinic, once parental consent has been given, this is the pattern that they follow. The team gathers key records, so things like the functional vision assessment, recent eye reports, IEP goals, and these are all reviewed by the clinical low vision specialists that are involved and the PAVE team. All of this happens in advance before the students even show up. On the day of clinic, students and families begin with an interview about visual functioning and everyday experiences. There's a short literacy assessment that follows, and then the student is going to go through a comprehensive low vision exam um, that covers things like refraction, visual fields, contrast, light sensitivity, and more. Those are all things that we've also covered in throughout this webinar series. The time then ends and has that opportunity to be able to try out different optical devices. And so within this model, each student spends at least an hour with the low vision specialist, and if needed, more time with the Project PAVE teachers. So after the clinic, the recommendations are then going to be guiding the instructional plan, which focuses on the expanded core curriculum. Students first are going to learn those technical and mechanical skills and then move on to integrating those skills into daily routines, just like, reading signs in the community or using a monocular in class. The instruction is provided by PAVE teachers of that project and always starts outside the classroom, then moves inward. And so that PAVE teacher makes sure that to address those psychosocial issues head on. So how do students feel using the device around peers? Are they comfortable being seen with the device in using it? So that type of confidence is what matters. It's gives them that access to that visual efficiency. And so reviewing also and last, making sure to look over that clinic report with the teachers, the family, the educational staff. It just helps support that mindset for everyone that's on the team that's supporting that particular student. And the results, after a 6-month period, it's been documented that students receiving the device instruction began to close the gap between their reading speeds with those of their sighted peers. Silent reading rates improved, visual efficiency increased, and beyond those academics, students gained independence, stronger social skills, and better access to recreation and daily living activities. So Project PAVE illustrates that students just don't need the tools. They need the instruction, the encouragement, and the collaboration That's what helps them to embrace those tools as part of who they are. And that's what sets this model apart and why we want to promote it today, of how this has been a springboard for other projects that have come in around the country as well. So I am going to hand this off and to Tara, and we want to hear more about Georgia and what you have going on there for Low Vision Project.
Hey, so hello everybody. I am Tara.Bowie from the Smoky Powell Center in Georgia. And we talked before about the Smoky Powell Center. It is an Office of State Schools from Georgia Department of Education. And there's an outreach program from the Department of Education, which serves both DHH, deaf, hard of hearing, and blind and visual impaired students. And so we're part of that outreach program. And so when we talk about our low vision clinic, there are several other things that the Smoky Powell Clinic does, but we do low vision evaluations, eye health clinics. We also do access to technology assessments and consults, as well as a AT loan program for districts, and also professional learning opportunities, as well as local on-site support and resources. These are all services that are provided at no charge. Like Amy said, Project PAVE kind of had that start to all of these other programs. And so for the Smoky Powell Center, it's very similar, but it also has additional programs as well. So to talk a little bit about the low vision program, I'll wait for that next slide to pop up there. The low vision clinic as well as the eye health clinics. The eye health clinics is new to the Smoky Powell Center just this year. We did a pilot program and started with Georgia Academy for the Blind and also moved that over to the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. And we created eye health exams mainly because we found that when we were doing clinical low vision evaluations, a lot of our students did not have the actual updated eye health exam that they needed to be able to move to the next step of the clinical low vision evaluation. So that's why you will see that there as well. Again, this is an outreach program that's part of Georgia Department of Education and state schools. We have a model where we have 23 low vision clinics per school year, and we're going to have 12 eye health clinics per school year as well. This school year, the 24-25 school year, we served approximately 180 students that received free evaluations, devices, resources at no charge to the students and families and districts, which we're super excited about. Every year we try and make that a little bit higher. Last year, I think our number was 150 students. We offer assistive technology loan program to assist students and districts to choose the most appropriate technology for both school and home. Now, remember, we talked about our clinical low vision evaluations. We give out devices at that time, but if there are students who after that are going to need additional devices that sometimes have a pretty high ticket value to them, the Smoky Powell Center offers a loan program for those districts to be able to try before you buy, if you will, make sure that the devices suit the student and their task, and we move on from there. Then referrals are made through the school district. So although we do serve our students and our families, we make sure that we're moving through the school districts for the referrals. So that could be the special ed directors, our teachers for the visually impaired, special ed teachers. That's where we get our referrals from. Also, students must be between the ages of 3 to 21. Of course, it could be 22 if they're still in their IEP, but they're served on an IEP or in the eligibility process and receiving services from a TBI or orientation mobility specialist. This is very important because we want to make sure, like we talked about before, once they receive that equipment, that they have someone that is properly teaching them how to use the equipment. And in our model, that's our teachers for the visually impaired. Also, students are recommended to return every 2 to 3 years, or if there's a change in their vision. So that's our Smoky Paw model.
Thank you so much, Tara. Now we'll switch over and hear of Jodi from you in South Carolina.
So Project Magnify in South Carolina is exactly or very, very closely related to the way Project PAVE works. Many of the things that Amy went over for Project PAVE are also the things that we do in South Carolina. Project Magnify was designed as a cooperative program between our Department of Education and the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. We accept 30 students a year, and with those 30 students, we provide them with a low vision evaluation, then prescribed devices, and then we have teachers of the visually impaired that are employed by the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind who go into districts and work with the TVIs or the O&M instructors in that district with the child. So we pre-set up meetings, and the TVI and our Project Magnify our Project Magnify individual goes in and works in tandem with the TVI and with the student on the devices that they're prescribed at clinic. Referrals can be made throughout the entire school year, but our students for next year are selected in May. We do have a form because we only can accept 30 students because of funding. We often have more than 30 students apply. We have a form that we fill out as we meet as a team to rank students based on different needs that they have, so that we prioritize having individuals come into our low vision clinics. Clinics generally occur sometime in late August or early September during the beginning of the school year, and they occur over 3 days, potentially 4, depending on where our need is for students, or the highest need. But generally they're held in Spartanburg, in Columbia, and then again in Charleston, so that we've split the state into 3 areas for students and families to travel to. The devices are generally ordered in September, beginning of October, and then delivered to students by the end of October, 1st of November, that we're beginning to work with the students in their district. For Project Magnify, students need to qualify. As with Smoky Powell and other places, students can be between the ages of 3 and 21. They need to be on an IEP, and they need to be receiving services from a TVI or an O&M instructor. In South Carolina, students can return through the program every 3 years. So we recommend it, we encourage it, and we ask for students. Specifically, we'll contact students who have gone through in previous years to let their TVIs know that the student is eligible to return back through the program if they're interested.
So on this particular slide, we are talking about just the variations in low vision programs. We've used that Project PAVE as our anchor, as the model moving forward. And so now it's just kind of differentiating here between Georgia and South Carolina. And so Tara, would you hop on in and just share some of these bullet points that are specific about Georgia as we kind of look and do a comparison?
Yes, so our Georgia program, and one thing that I forgot to note before is that just like South Carolina, we have a collaboration with Georgia Department of Education, but how our program got started as far as that funding is that there was a gentleman by the name of Smoky Powell, and so that's how we're named after this gentleman who actually gave a huge donation to the state of Georgia. He was a man that was also visually impaired, and so that he wanted an endowment to go to the state of Georgia for students who needed devices for low vision services. So that's why we're called the Smoky Powell Center, and that's why we have this large endowment to be able to service students in the way that we do and giving out free devices. So, along with that, because we serve the entire state of Georgia, we have satellite clinics throughout the state. So, although we are housed at Georgia Academy for the Blind and we have a clinic there, we travel throughout the state to have our various clinics, both low vision clinics and eye health clinics. The same is for our access to technology assessments. We do go out to do those assessments, but a lot of them have been virtual. Once we see those students in our clinic, we have a pretty good idea of what our step 2 is. And so we can usually have those technology assessments virtually, but sometimes you just need to go out and see these students in person and be able to put the device in their hands and really see how things are working out through the school. Another model here is that device training and resources are available through a consult model throughout the school year. So we don't serve students directly. We work through the teacher for the visually impaired. We make sure that they are trained properly on the devices so that they can then make sure that their students and their parents are trained properly. And also, as I mentioned before, we have a 1-year loan program for districts. They have the ability to actually purchase these devices, and that can be a video magnifier, it could be a Braille Note Touch, it could be outside of the scheme of just low vision types of devices. But they can also purchase it at a depreciated value at the end of the loan. And this also gives the district the ability to save on funding, to know exactly what that funding will be for that device at the end of the year, and just help them a great deal to be able to choose the right device for students.
In South Carolina, our clinic is set up different. So we only do clinics for 3 days. We do them 3 days in a row. We have a private doctor that we contract with who comes out to do, who is a specialist in low vision, that comes out to do our exam. And then we have an occupational therapist who is able to, who's also a certified low vision specialist. And that individual does our prescription of devices. So if a student misses clinic for any reason, then they cannot participate in the program for that year. And they are automatically moved to the following school year. And I know it seems a little bit harsh, but if they don't attend that low vision clinic, then we have no way of knowing what devices would work for those students. So we really work over, our selections are done in May, and we work for May, June, July, and most of August, contacting parents, following up with parents, following up with TVIs, making sure that those students understand and those parents understand that they have to be at this clinic in order to participate in the program. And then the other thing is that we do have individuals who go out every month. So we usually will start in late October or November seeing students, and we see students until until April, where we finish up with our last visit before we get into statewide or standardized testing season in May.
Okay. Excellent. And so, Cindy, would you share just the highlights of your programming in Texas with us?
And in Texas, we do not have as Tara and Jodi have described, a statewide clinic. There definitely are a list of low vision specialists in the state that uh, TVIs, the vision professionals, can assist the families in getting those exams set up. But my role as low vision consultant at TSBVI and for the state, it's kind of a hybrid position because I do see student teacher teams on campus as requested for support with whether it's psychosocial needs, learning about eye anatomy, or using the lower tech, the handheld tools. But my role was created for developing that programming, providing the services, things like raising awareness of why the low vision exam matters, how it is different from the eye exam, what we get out of that, how it increases visual functioning. So along with that, I help to create trainings and workshops for adults. So the VI professionals in the state. For example, we're doing one this summer on reading with low vision. We have a model on the one-day bioptic driving awareness workshop. So taking those trainings out to the state. My favorite one, I will hands down admit, is doing the Low Vision on the Road student program, where we collaborate with one of the regional centers to customize a day of activities. And it's very much optical device use based. So these students are getting together with peers and going out into the community, real life use of these tools. So it's more, in your daily activities, not per se the classroom based. Also, we do an annual low vision conference that focuses on the population of students who are primarily print users. Often, I think those students receive often consult service, or not as sometimes it's the service is just once every 6 weeks, once every 9 weeks, so it's more limited. And we want to provide for the vision professionals in the state, what is it that these students are needing? So every year we have a different theme. Because it can be harder if, these students read print. He doesn't use a cane. She's fine. And it's raising that awareness of what those students are needing. And then I also coordinate, and that's based on staff request, having the low vision specialist who sees most of our students, who has a practice in Austin, setting up a clinic that can be done on campus. So my role is really about promoting the low vision awareness, programming, and services. And just a couple of pictures on the next slide from that student day. So again, getting students together, learning about eye anatomy, taking a device into the community setting like a grocery store. The student in the picture there is examining a tarantula. That is not my arm. I can identify that is not my arm that tarantula is sitting on. But what's the hook to get students interested in that? If I can make this target bigger and see the detail, then I'm interested in using that tool.
That is amazing. And I'm glad that it is not my arm, but I am glad that that student found something incredibly interesting and motivating for him to look at, because that is what it's all about, as long as it's not my arm. So best practices and strategies. All right. So as we've seen from projects in Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, we are seeing how structured support and collaboration actually changes students' access to the visual environment and to get access to that information and gain independence. And so with that foundation in mind, we are now get to shift our focus ever so slightly to a panel discussion where we're going to kind of talk with our presenters here to focus on strategies and insights from their own work, helping us to, again, be able to learn from one another, and having that background of where they come from, what things look like in their state, helps us to also put ourselves in their shoes as we kind of delve into some of these questions. And so here we want to think about that early start, lifelong impact. And so we have this question here, and Cindy, your camera is still on. I would love to just hear and learn from you on this. Can you share a story of a preschool age child who benefited from early clinic attendance and, what that set in motion for their success?
Yes. When I have previously been a teacher with Project PAVE, and a mom called me, her 3-year-old had come through our clinic, and I was the PAVE teacher that went out to see this student. And She said from the back of the car, he said, "Mom, stop. We have to go home. I can't go to school without my telescope, and I left it at home." And her voice was so animated, sharing his, I've got to have that scope at school. And I share that 14 years later, they had been living in Texas, and he came to our low vision driving workshop. And it's that if you get started early in services, they have that impact of being able to continue to benefit from those services throughout the child's schooling.
Wow, I love that. Spotlight's on you just a little bit more. So, what strategies have worked for you when helping families of young children overcome that hesitation or fear about a clinical low vision evaluation?
And I think what we all on this probably through the room do is helping families understand why is the low vision exam different? Because, well, we get the annual eye exam every year, but the low vision exam is about functioning. We want to increase that visual access. And very specifically, the appointment does that. And I think it helps families to talk about, if they have that reluctance of I'm uncertain about my child having to use a tool that is different from all their peers, and talking about that, let's more generally talk about tools. How do all of us use tools that help us out? Making sure that the parent understands, has looked through the telescope and knows how it works. And those life goals of, when your child is 18, 21, being able to access those visual targets. I think it's that long range picture beyond the just today, how I'm feeling about it. So helping the families to talk about where their uncertainty is and how the tools can benefit the student.
That's great. And so we kind of transition now. So in really encouraging that device use at all ages. Tara, this might be a great question. Would love to hear your insight. Can you share about a time that you worked with an elementary student who was reluctant to use the prescribed device and what made the difference for that particular student?
Definitely. So one that pops into my head is show and tell. Our elementary school students, just like any middle, high school, they really don't want to be different than any other student. And so I had this little girl, and she had a multitude of devices that she needed to use. But she, of course, felt like all the other students were going to look at her differently. But she was also she just had this personality of life, and she was very popular in her old sense. So I said, well, how do you feel about public speaking? What if we get up there and we just show all the kids in the room all about what you're using? They get one time to touch it, to use it, to try it. And you get to pick who tries what, and you'll be in charge of everything. We'll put a PowerPoint together, we'll make it happen. She was all over it. So we put a PowerPoint together. She knew what kids would try, what devices. She was also going to be a dual learner, so she was going to be learning Braille as well. We had the Braille writer out. She brailled everybody's name in the classroom. She showed everybody her video magnifier. She explained it. She picked 4 kids that would be able to touch all the different devices. We wanted everybody, but she said she'd pick 4 per device. But she was very, this was just her personality. And once she went through this, and once she saw what the kids thought, everything was just really cool and exciting. It worked for her. It was just what she needed to feel okay in her own environment, in her own skin, using her own devices. And she really felt good about something we talked about earlier, which was showing off these skills that she has to be able to work with these devices. So show and tell, it doesn't always work because not all kids have that same personality and want to get up there and do that. But it's always worked for a lot of my kids, the show and tell part of it. So that's what has helped so far.
I, we're talking about all ages. We've talked about elementary, you move into middle school, which can be a really tough, that's a tough time span.
Right.
And, sometimes with those students, it's more, they're just going to be compliant. I'll do it, but I don't want to do it.
Right.
So how do you move from that transition of, okay, I'll do it because you're making me, to, wow, I see, I feel confident and I'm able to use this independently.
Right. Well, the early start is you hope to get them in elementary school using these devices already. But, we've also seen where they'll use it in elementary and then decide in middle, no, thank you. So, what I have found with some of my middle school students is, and I've told parents and other teachers this, it really is a maturity thing, as to where they are in that level and to meet them where they are. So, a lot of my students, we have moved to electronic devices that they're able to use that other students are using. It might be an iPad, it might be their laptop, and it might be every now and then they might pull out a magnifier when they need it or a monocular device. But what we've done is also give them the ability to use these devices at home, to say, these are things, a task analysis, if you will. These are things that you're going to use at school, and then these are devices that you will use at home, and they have that variance where they're getting what they need, but they choose when they're going to use it. And then it's just that maturity that sometimes it just pops back in there. There are some kids who just, I'm going to use what I need to use, and some that you just have to meet them where they are. So that's what we usually say, meet them where they are, try and start early, and then give them a lot of tools in their toolbox so they can choose what they're going to use and where they're going to use it.
That's great. And, as we kind of round up that age group, we
Mhm.
can't leave out high school. And so I wondered, Jodi, over in Project Magnify, maybe you could describe a high school student's journey who, that describes about being empowered by learning how to use their vision more efficiently, by going through the clinical evaluation process and learning how to use a device.
Absolutely. So we had a student who had a retinal dystrophy and basically an unspecified, and had known the diagnosis since about sixth grade, but really started losing vision significantly when they got towards their end of middle school, beginning of high school. The student was very, very reluctant to look different than the other students around her. And so one of the things we did was talk about going, I say going through the side door. So using things that the student could use at school where the device she was using would look like anybody else's. For instance, we gave her textbooks on audio with Learning Ally. So now you can use an iPad, or the app can be downloaded to your phone, and the student looks like anybody else with their phone or with their iPad, or you can even download it on a computer now. Back in old school, we had to use a Victor Stream, which actually did look like the first iPhones that came out. It was a big blocky thing that the students had that had buttons on it. We also talked about with this student, we did training outside of school hours. So that's one of the things that not everybody can offer a student, but we were able to meet the student outside of school hours and use the devices outside and kind of help her build up her confidence so that then she was able to use them more effectively in the school environment. I think to me, the best thing about it was when I went back to see this particular student, she was so excited, and she told me that she had gone to a Clemson game, which Clemson is a huge college in South Carolina with a robust football program, for those of you who are not aware. and football is a huge thing in South Carolina. She had gone with a friend's family, not her own family, but a friend's family. And she had taken her monocular with her, and it was the first time that she had used the device in front of other people that weren't family. And she was so excited when she came back to tell me that for the first time she was able to see what was going on the field while the game was taking place, and that she actually used her monocular, but she gave it to her friend too. I was like, oh, look. And so they were able to trade monoculars back and the monocular back and forth, and they were both able to benefit from it. So it was one of those empowering things where she took control and she used the device outside of what was very obviously her comfort zone to begin with, and became so empowered to use it that she suggested to her friend and her parent and the parents of her friend, hey, you might want to take a look too. So I think that's kind of, to me, the big thing is when your high school kids understand outside of school how much this device can benefit them.
Absolutely. Well, if we, shift over just to that collaborative success stories, what we know about what we learned from Project PAVE is that collaborative piece and how that has been used in Georgia, in South Carolina, also in Texas. So here, Tara, would you share an example of, how a TVI and an orientation mobility specialist work together to just to reinforce that optical device use in travel instruction and range of settings, that sort of thing?
Yes. So, as a teacher for the visually impaired and an orientation mobility specialist, I love this subject because it's very easy for me to think about working with other specialists. So, when I had students as the orientation mobility specialist, I always made sure that TVIs were involved in the idea of knowing what we were working on, knowing what the goals and objectives were, and knowing how we did that within the school setting and also in the community setting. So, one of the ways that I love to collaborate is to try and join in on lessons that the TVI had so that we would check off each other's goals and objectives. If they were working on mapping skills, then I would make sure that those mapping skills were a part of what we were doing for O&M and use devices for that. If they were using things that had to do with travel at the time or something that had to do with that with history class, we would do that and use that for monocular telescope when we were out traveling within the community. So we would take each other's goals and objectives and see which ways we would be able to share it. But not only with the TVI, also with our PTs and our OTs and SLPs. It was one of the great ways to say, this is what we're working on with the monocular telescope. This is what we're doing with the video magnifier. Let's find ways that you can incorporate this within your lesson as well, but especially in the community. I would go out with CBI classes to make sure that all the other students are there as well, and we would just share those skills. So it's really important for especially TVIs and O&M specialists to work together and reinforce all of the different optical devices, but to think about that outside of our TVIs and O&M, along with our PTs, our OTs, and SLPs and special ed teachers as well.
And so just again, just a little bit more on that, Tara. In your experience, what has helped build that effective collaboration? That's that collaboration between the clinic-based professionals and the school-based teams.
I would say I used to work with a shared service team, so it made it so much easier. And our shared services were all, OTs, PTs, O&M, and TVIs. So there were times that we would sit down and have a monthly meeting about students that we shared information with, that we shared caseloads. And so my experience is making sure that if you're in a setting where you have the opportunity to work with those other teachers, plan a time to say, let's talk about the students that we share and ways that we can collaborate their lessons. If not, you can reach out. I mean, since COVID, we found different ways that we can reach out and do Zoom calls and team calls and work with our different professionals on students that we are sharing. Now, when it comes to the school setting, usually in the school setting, the services are going to be educational based versus clinic based. But there are some times that even as a TBI or O&M specialist, we have students that might in Atlanta go to the Marcus Center or have private OT and PT services. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out to those professionals and sharing exactly what you're doing in the school setting to see if you can collaborate and do the same thing. Why? Because this also helps the student and also the parents who are working with two sets of teams, sometimes clinical and educational, and being able to pull those two teams together can really help the family as a whole.
Mhm. That's great. So continuing to shift and keep the flow, device integration throughout the day. Jodi, what sort of daily life routines or classroom practices have you seen successfully support consistent device use that's across multiple settings or subjects?
So one of the things that comes to mind, or a particular student for sure that comes to mind, we talked about using the device outside of school and incorporating it into those ECC skills and into daily life. So we walked outside one day and we were looking at finding the pole to then go up to see the street sign. And my student instead found the power line pole and traced up it. And as she moved her monocular across, there were birds on the power line. And she was astonished that birds sat on power lines. She had never before seen that. And so then it became a, what else can we spot using our monocular? What else can we look at? Walking around the school, we went into the gym, and she actually was able to tell that the banners that hung in the gym showed state playoffs that different sports had been in over the years. That's not something she had really ever particularly seen clearly enough to be able to tell that's what they were. For magnifier uses, the same idea. So one of my other students used a magnifier in class, in ELA specifically, to try to, speed up their reading. Well, we brought in other things for them to do with that magnifier. We brought in a takeout menu from their local restaurant that they liked. We also brought in like grocery store flyers and an Oriental Trader magazine or catalog. And we're kind of like, let's look, help me plan my grocery shopping for this weekend, because their students love to help you out to do things like that. And then she also, when we used the Oriental Trading Catalog, it was, can you help me find some prizes that you or other students might enjoy that we could offer? And so using it for things outside or not classroom based really helped those students understand that this wasn't a device that was just useful at school. It was also a device that they could use outside of school. And then as far as like for classroom practices, the biggest buy-in is having the teacher politely remind the student or offer the student the option of using a device, but not browbeating the student into using the device. That it's one of those things where you have a teacher who just quietly steps beside the student and says, do you think this might be something that you want to use your magnifier for? Or is this something you might want to use your Visio Lux or your Jupiter for? But not browbeating the student from the front of the room. Don't you think you need to take your device out right now? Don't you think this would work better if you? And I think that's the big thing, that it's always a positive experience for the kid, that it's not a negative experience.
I love that example that you shared, Jodi, about the birds on the wire. That is a great, I can see that in my mind. So, with coaching and mindset shifts, I want to talk a little bit about sharing a time when, a family or an educator had a mindset shift. seeing the benefit of a student's device use and, what triggered that change. Do you have something that you could share on that as well, Jodi?
Absolutely. So I have a student that the mom had known someone in the community who had a vision impairment, and this individual had a lot of self-stimming behaviors. And the mother, when she found out that her daughter was losing vision, was very reluctant to have her child use any type of low vision devices or to even receive services at school because, quote, she didn't want her child like that other person. Her child wasn't going to be like that other person. And so she wanted, the best for her child. So it really started with getting trust from the parent and the student to kind of work with them on how can we better help this student. And in middle school, it really started to change because the parent, it was taking the student an hour and a half to 2 hours just to do 20 problems in math because she had a dome magnifier and that was it. And the parent just basically came to me and said, we need to fix this. How do we fix this? How do we make this easier for the student? And so we started with some devices that the student could use at home that then could be taken to school. The school could then purchase equipment that reflected what was at home. We also used, as she got a little bit older, I found an older CCTV that she could have access to that helped. But to me, the big breakthrough for the parent and the change in mindset came because I had earned this parent's trust, because I had earned this student's trust. I observed the student doing something. She took her sunglasses. She'd gotten a pair of Ray-Ban glasses for sunglasses. And when she went to take them out of her case, she did it completely 100% tactily and put them up and on her face. And I looked at the parent, as the student walked out of the room to go do something, I looked at the parent and I said, I don't think this child is safe to cross a street by herself anymore. I don't think this child is safe to do some of the independent activities that involve cheerleading and some other things that she was involved in. And I asked the parent to watch out for these particular things over the course of the week. And I gave her a list of things. And the parent did. And because she had trusted me, she came back to me like 2 weeks later and she said, you're 100% right. She's not safe to do those things. And so we went from a parent who wanted no service at all, no devices at all, to a parent and a student who wanted devices, wanted to be able to use devices, and then wanted services and orientation and mobility instruction.
That's amazing and powerful. Okay, so with coaching and mindset shifts, another one, what's a small but powerful strategy you've used to build student buy-in for learning to use their devices? I know that there's got to be, a lot of educators out there that really want to glean from your wisdom on this one.
I have used the phrase, I think, in the previous webinars that, it may be the obvious that what interests the student, just like Jodi was saying, if they're motivated, then they're going to use a tool. So more than looking at the whiteboard or, using the magnifier on your addition math problems. What are the things in their home, in their community on the weekends that they do that will draw that student's interest? I think another one is, and I had said that earlier, on bringing a group of students together. I think Tara had mentioned if they're with a peer who also has low vision and they're using the tools together, it's more appealing for them. And also that the adults around them, whether it's families, neighbors that are encouraging that device use. Not not as much pestering and nagging, but positive support to encourage the getting that visual access. I think all three of those help the student understand how valuable the tool can be.
Mhm.
Anything in particular, Tara, that you would want to add to that?
I mean, that is exactly it. I mean, an example of that is I had this little girl and she loved to read. So what we did in our classroom, we she loves stuffed animals, and so we decided that she would be the teacher, and we got all these stuffed animals together, and everyone donated stuffed animals to our little classroom. Well, we wound up having about 20 stuffed animals that we sat in these little chairs. And so she would do demonstrations of how to use her devices, how to read with her devices, how every time she learned something new, she would teach her bears. And that was our classroom, it was the bear cave. And this was how she loved to teach. She was a bossy little thing. And so anytime she was able to teach something or be in control of something, that was something of a buy-in for her. And so when we had to learn something new, we would say, okay, let's learn it. And then you're going to teach the bears, how to use this. And then she would take that on and then she would teach her mom how to use it and her dad how to use it and so on and so on. So I agree with that buy-in. Find a way that they can have a buy-in to something and then use that so that they're comfortable with those devices.
So, with keeping our tools current and relevant, Cindy, what tips would you offer to teachers or families who aren't sure when a student might need exposure to different tools?
I that making sure that the low vision exam has happened, of course, and helping families and the educational team remember that analogy of maintaining a good toolbox, not an overflowing toolbox, but a kind of a curated toolbox of what is working. Um, and especially looking for those spots through the day that tool use gets you the information you want, that you're not going without information, that you're seeing what is important. So looking through that day, whether it's classroom or beyond the classroom, and identifying specific tasks, getting good. Even if the student just, okay, I'll work on these 2 or 3 tasks. If you have a reluctant student on this, that they have some control over, I'll choose, when I'm going to use the tool.
And how about, program insights? So, stick with you, Cindy, here for another moment. What are 1 or 2 key ingredients from your state's, way of working with students with low vision that have helped students go from being unsure of their vision to confidently using it?
I think one of the biggest, I've used the phrase, for the students who are really guarded on this topic, that talking about just the human eye anatomy, the visual system, and starting with lessons that we're going to learn about, the front part of the eye and the back part of the eye, and the cornea is like a windshield, that blocks things, and the retina is the back carpet, the wall, back wall of the eye. So the student is understanding. Um, and then you can move into their particular eye condition. So you're making it a little more personal. I think that's been one really, kind of getting in the door for students who are very blocked on this. And the other one, having the conversation with them where you're talking about, how do you feel about the tool? When are times that It might be uncomfortable for you to use, or what can make it more comfortable. So you're talking about that. I am somebody with low vision, and tools can help me to see better. Sometimes with students, I'll call it like a superpower, because adding that tool on makes, enhances my vision, helps me to see things, to understand what's going on around me more.
I love that. And Cindy, so much of through this webinar series that you've been sharing with us, just it circles back to that psychosocial that gives that buy-in and knowing and meeting the student exactly where they're at. So I really appreciate that insight. Well, I have rounded up towards the end of us talking about our questions. We went through the whole gamut of working with really young students to all the way through high school, with the collaboration and working with families, um, ideas of things that might be helpful for all of you who are working with students that you just need some extra ideas. I hope that this has been a valuable time. I appreciate your patience and for the audience and allowing us this little bit of extra time to be able to address the things that we wanted to make sure to get in. And I can't say enough how meaningful this has been working with you, Cindy and Jodi and Tara. I feel like a love language of mine has been fed because I've learned and thought about things that I haven't, that I just haven't necessarily considered. And it has been a while since I've worked with students one-on-one. So I have loved this tremendously. Thank you for all of the time and energy and expertise that you have given to this. This was all extra above and beyond what you do from day to day. So thank you for partnering with us here at APH in order to archive this content and be able to still be able to share it out in time to come from people who want to know more about working with students that are low vision and that use devices. I know that